Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I would like to introduce you to version 6 of my many-to-many decentralized train system with outpost building, with the player's depot, and with outpost maintenance. This video is just going to be the place that you will be referred to get your blueprints, as well as to see the changelog if you need to update your blueprints. And I would also like to give you an overview of the capabilities I've built into the system, why you might want to use this blueprint book to get to as your stations rather than the vanilla setups. All right. So I guess the easiest way to explain it, and if you've seen the videos on my version 5, you'll be familiar with this story, is why I started designing the system in the first place. So much like many people, I started playing Factorio and mostly went to main bus bases, and I built a couple dozen of those. Eventually I just got bored of main bus bases and I wanted to switch to some railtown maps. However, the railtown maps, the idea is essentially that for every item in the game, you build it in its own outpost. And the challenge comes mostly from your train logistics. How do you manage hundreds of trains in your network without jams, right? Without slowing down too much, without reducing your throughput too much. That's basically the idea of railtown maps. If you enjoy trains, you're gonna love those kind of games. The downside is, of course, that you need to actually build hundreds of outposts. And in my case, I didn't want to go with a simple builder train setup where you go into the train and you select filters with your middle mouse click. You select your filters of what you want in that train, and then you can be sure that your train will have exactly the loadout that you want. I didn't want anything like that because I figured that if I was going to build hundreds of different stations, I'm going to need the ability to tell my trains what to load and potentially have hundreds of different loadouts. So I ended up building a system that was more and more advanced, more and more flexible, of loading builder trains. And the heart of it is essentially the player's depot, and I have a spacious version here and a compact version here. The difference is really just the looks, and the bigger one needs its own seat square, right? Whereas the smaller one, the compact version, fits in the same square as your outposts will. But I do prefer this one because it's just has a much nicer layout, much more comfortable to move around in as well. With the compact version, you'll be running across your trains all the time, right? Okay. So what can you do with this? Let's start with the resource stations. They are a little bit simpler, and they are just as important. They're basically what you're going to be spending most of your time building, right? So you'll want to know what the abilities of these are. And this is where the whole decentralized decentralizing train system part comes in. So in vanilla, if you have a train and it has in its schedule a station that it wants to go to, and you have two stations of the same name, the train is going to choose the closest station. And if you wanted to choose the further station, you need to trick around a little bit. So you might have to turn off the closest station, so the train can only go to the furthest station. Or you could, for example, apply path penalties. So what happens if you have rail signals that you can close with a circuit condition? If you apply that circuit condition to the signal, it will then pretend that the segment it is attached to is 1000 tiles longer than it really is. So if you stack enough of them, you can make a train choose the further station, despite both stations being viable targets at the same time. And I'm controlling the number of signals that need to be turned red via the number of trains the stations could serve. So this station, for example, has no items loaded at all, right? It is a loading station. You can see the inserters are trying to load the train. However, there are no items in any of the chests, so it can serve the minimum amount of trains, which is actually none. It cannot serve any trains. Therefore, you can see in this display, none of the lights are lit up. If we look down here instead, this is the unloading station, right? So this could serve the maximum amount of trains because it is completely free of items. So the buffers, it can serve, if you look at the T signal on the red wire, 14 trains. I have 10 lamps here, which is basically all I need. I don't need to know if I can serve 10 trains or 14 trains. I just know that I can serve more than 10 trains by the fact that there are 10 lamps lit up, plus this lamp, which tells me I can serve at least 10 trains and then another partial train, in this case, one additional wagon, right? If I mouse over this pole, I can say I can serve 14 trains plus one additional wagon. And this is calculated based on the amount of items that I have in here. And this system automatically respects stack sizes. So as you might know, your ores stack in sizes of 50. If I enable debug mode, I can see here item stack size 50, whereas the plates would be item stack size 100. This is automatically calculated. The systems and all the systems have the ability to send or request the information that they need from the global network and save it to a memory. So this is the memory in this case. What happens as long as it is empty, I start a timer and the timer sends across the global network a pulse that it needs the information of what's supposed to go in this memory. And then I have at the main base, so this is the blueprint, therefore the global memory providers, the global providers are outside the base, but usually it would look like this, or you can change the position, of course, however you want it. But the information that a memory needs the data comes in over the global network and triggers one of these two. So this is for items, right? Every item is sorted by its stack size. This is all the items with stack size 1, stack size 5, 10, 20, 50, and so on. And this system is designed in such a way that you can very easily modify these stack sizes if you use mods, right? The entire system currently is set up to play with vanilla. However, you can easily use it with mods that add items by using a script that I will provide in the description. And I will explain that further in another video. So if you need to know how that works right now, you can just go to the playlist and check that. But what you will do is you will use the script and it'll spawn you a line of combinators with all the items that are currently in your game. And then you can add those combinators to this system. And the same over here, just with virtual signals. You won't need this too much, but this is something that you're going to be using in every single system. So, right, resource stations. So in that way, there is in one location you have the items sorted by stack size, and then every other location that needs that information can simply call on it via the global network. The information will be saved in here and will be provided to the station to calculate how many stacks the items in your buffer make up, and how many trains could the station serve with that amount of stacks, and that gets turned into a signal on how many of these lamps need to be turned green or red, right? So in this case, the station could serve all the trains, therefore all the signals are green, and up here it's the opposite. No trains could be served. So first of all, this is a loadout station, so it doesn't happen, but if this was an unloader station, the station would be turned off, as well as all the signals being turned red. And as a station can serve trains, the station re-enables, but the level of items determines how many of the signals are turned red or green. One further ability of the station aside from the station itself turning off. So I should probably show this. There's a latch system. You have a couple settings combinators here. You can choose how many chests you have, right? 48 currently. As you can see, 48. Each chest, because these are steel chests, have 48 slots. That's the second number here. How many wagons in a train, and how many cargo slots do you have in one wagon, right? And that's used to calculate how many trains could be served and how many stacks you actually have in the station. Over here, you can turn your station on and off if you put this to 0. So right now you can see that the station is still yellow, it's still on. It is now turned off, and this lamp will reflect the status as well. This is the amount of path penalty signals we have over here, and the penalty tail or penalizing tail, 68 signals, therefore Z says 68. Another option would be to look at the last settings combinator is the latch system. So with this, you turn the latch on and off. Right, for loading station it is turned off so that the trains don't know path if all the stations happen to not be able to serve trains. Here it is turned on. Unloading stations can turn themselves off if they cannot serve enough trains, and they will turn themselves back on if they can serve enough trains, and this is handled by the upper and the lower threshold. So as soon as a station can only serve as soon as a station can only serve 3 or less trains, it will turn itself off. And it will stay off until it can serve 10 or more trains again. You can see 10 or more trains. The idea is that if a station is not even worth going to, the trains will not attempt to go there, aside from the penalty being applied throughout the entire time that the station is on, and therefore trains splitting up between stations. So if you have 5 unloading stations next to each other, the trains will split up evenly amongst all of them, because the item levels will be equalized using the path penalty system, right? The more items the station has, the more the trains want to go there. And if you have a bunch of stations all with different item levels, the trains will prefer the station with the most items first, until eventually they're all going to be equal, and then you're going to have a nice spread of trains across all stations. The other part, the last ability of these stations that's a little bit special, is the dummy waypoint system. So what happens is as trains go into a station, obviously no other train will fit in there, right? So what I have done here is that each station can fit 3 trains in here. 1 train is being served and the other trains are ready to go right in and replace the train as soon as it leaves. Now if I have 3 trains in here, there is no more space for a train. I do not want more trains trying to go in here. So what I do, and not just that, the problem is that the trains will keep trying to go in here for the next 5 seconds at least, until they meet the countdown to repath, right? And that's every 5 seconds if they are waiting at a chain signal and have multiple stations with the same name as a target, right? That's still 5 seconds. They're going to stay here in the same place until they realize that there's another station that they could go to. So to cut that short, what I do is I disable this waypoint station as soon as there are too many trains in here, right? So if you look at the schedule of these guys, they go to a load waypoint, then into the actual load station, and you can see that over here. They go into the load waypoint, and then they go into the load station, right? And then they leave and they go up to the stacker, which is nicely visible here. They leave the station, right? They go up to the stacker, and if these guys enable, they wait here, right? And they only enable if the load, the target station that would come afterwards, in this case, outbound waypoint, iron plate unload. If this one was disabled, then this one would enable. This makes sure that the trains will wait in the stacker. They won't, no path in the middle of your train network. They will be forced to stay here and wait, and neither will they clock the station. So any train that is done loading will move out and will wait in the stacker until the next station enables. In this case, the train comes across to the iron plate unload, to the iron plate unload waypoint. If it is enabled, if it is not, it looks for the next unload waypoint, and it will come in here into the station. And once again, once it is done unloading, it'll move up to the stacker. And if these are disabled, it will just keep right on going to the iron plate waypoint over here, right? To the load waypoint, and thus you have a nice circle going on here. Right. There is a little trick. I'll go into that in depth on that, but if you have waypoint stations that can turn themselves off, you might also want some dummy stations that are unapproachable, right? So this one up here, you can see it. No train can ever go down here. These will always be red forever, right? So no train can ever approach the dummy station. The idea is that if all the dummy stations have turned if all the waypoint stations have turned themselves off, then the train is forced to wait here until it can actually be used, right? Because as soon as this station re-enables, because there aren't 3 trains anymore, and the station can serve trains, then this will re-enable, making this one turn off, and therefore the train that was waiting here, trying to go down here but couldn't, will suddenly realize, here, I need to actually go in here. Right, so that's the resource stations. The train system itself has been adjusted for maximum throughput pretty much on as few rails as possible. So what happens is there's some priority signaling. If there's a train that wants to leave the stacker, the trains that are currently on this line will be forced to go up here, making space for the one down here to keep accelerating. And that's basically the same everywhere, right? Expanding is very easily. We have stackers. These guys, you simply put them over here. You overlap the power poles, and then you can basically just connect the rail down here and add more different stations for different resources. The caveat of the resource system, that as I have set it up, is that each train can only serve one type of resource at a time. So only iron plates, or only copper plates, or only iron ore, or whatever, right? Whatever you have in it, only one item at a time. The same is true for the stations. They are set up to serve only one type of station at the same time. If you need trains that can serve multiple resources, you basically have to set up a handover system in such a way that you would have these single resource stations for different resources lined up, and then one customized unique station where you basically hand over all the resources in the ratios that you want into a unique train that only serves that station and only the target station where you need that particular mix of resources. So it's not like this forbids using multiple resources in a train. It's just that you will have to set that up depending on the local circumstances, right? I do not support it natively. That's it for the resource stations. Let's go over the player's depot. So over here, we have a system that can load any train with the items that you want in the train. Let's actually use this up here because I've already set that up. You can load any items that you want in the train. You can switch loadouts on the fly, and you can do so from anywhere on the map that you have access to the global network. So this is a remote. You can plant these anywhere at any time, right? This is a remote. All you do is you put it down and you connect it to the global network, right? The global network is delivered via the rails over here, right? This is very typical. Most people will use this, so do I. And the global network connects to every outpost and to every depot that you have connected to that rail system. And you have two different kinds of remotes. They look the same, they're used the same, but this one is for the player's depot. You can see that in the icon up here, right? And this one is for Outpost. You can see that on that icon. They do almost the same things. There are just a few differences regarding signals. For example, the Outpost maintenance and Outpost supply trains use the white square as addresses for the wagons, whereas the builder used the gray square. So what you do is you say, okay, I want in particular this loadout I have already prepared here. So there's default loadouts here. And they are split up by wagons. So this is wagon 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? You can see that in here too. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. You pick your loadout, you paste it in, and you give this inserter something to work with, right? So the train is now getting loaded with the loadout. Let's say you do actually want a different one, just like this. You turn the switch, and there we go, loadout switched. Train is being loaded with the new loadout. Right. Over here, the big bar tells you the loadout that you have currently chosen, how much of the wagon will it take up? Does it match the capacity of the cargo wagon? Right. The capacity checker, you also have it available up here. I'll show you how it works over here. So you choose the loadout for a wagon, and this is per wagon, right? And you put it in here. And then you can either see over here, yellow light means that you match the 40 slots of a vanilla cargo wagon perfectly. And if you do not, it goes red, this is too many items, right? Or if you have space, it is green. And if you need to know exactly how many slots that is, you can mouse over and you can look for the I signal, the information signal. In this case, it is 40, so I know I have filled up the wagon exactly to capacity. Right, and this does respect partial stacks as well. So for example, right now you can see I have 0 stacks in there. If I add even one item, it counts as a stack already because it effectively takes up a stack. And this doesn't change if I add, let's say, 10 wooden poles, 10, what do they call it, wood? Yeah, just wood. This is still only one stack, of course, right? Only once I go to 101, right? And then we'll be at 2 stacks. So I'm rounding up here so that you won't mistakenly think that you can't fit items in the train when actually you already have a stack too many. Over here you can also look at the display. It's a little bit far away because up here I didn't have much space. Down here it's a little bit nicer. You just put in your item, right? And you can immediately read off the amount of stacks. Right, and it's basically the same story over here with these bars of lights for each wagon individually. If all the lamps are lit up, you're using 40. If all the lamps are red, you are trying to put too much in the train. Further, you can read off how full they are by looking at how many of the lamps are turned on. So if you have exactly half the lamps turned on, you are at exactly 20 stacks. Quarter of the lamps turned on, so 3 in this case, is exactly 10. 3/4 is exactly 30, and full is exactly 40. I've gone a little bit in depth here and made sure that there would not be any mistakes on the quarter, half, 3/4, and full stacks. Sorry about that. And I've done so by adding a few more steps. So the first lamp will only turn on if you have at least one item in the train, right? It will stay off as soon as you do not have any items on the train. The second lamp turns on for 5, right? And this one turns on for 10. But I don't go from 10 to 15 here, I go from 10 to 11. And this is so that you can be sure if this lamp is lit up and this is not, you accurately have only 1/4 of the train filled up. As soon as this is on and this one is on, you know that you're somewhere between from 11 to 14, right? Or between 10 and 15, or between 10 and 16. And this one lights up as soon as you're 15. And up here we have 20, and over here we have 10, 21, and so on, right? 30, 31. So you know that if half the lamps are lit up, you are at exactly 20 stacks. You are not at somewhere between 20 and 25, right? If this is confusing to you, you can always just change the numbers here to reflect accurately. So there's 12 lamps, right? You could maybe reduce it by 2 and then say, okay, you have 1 lamp turned on for every 10%. That would be a possibility too. These 2 lamps over here give you the state of your wagon, and over here this one is important too. This is basically a display, and it shows you the items that are still missing in your trains. Currently we are fully loaded, therefore with the loadout that we want on the train, therefore this lamp is green. If it would be red, that would tell you that we are still missing items on the train, and this inserter would display to you on a quick glance 4 of those items. If you click on it, up to 5, but then you could also just mouse over this combinator over here, and it would show you all the items that you're missing. You can see that over here, right? The filter inserter tells me 4 of the items that we're missing. The lamp is red, and if I mouse over this, I can see all the items that we are currently still need to load in a train if it was here. Right. Up here you can see the state of the entire train, and this is the true state. So this state is basically what your inserters are tracking. If there's any corruption, the wagon tracker might not accurately reflect what you have in the wagon. So if I remove an item here, right, this system thinks now, because it tracks what the inserters put into the wagon. So I have removed all the rails, but the wagon system over here doesn't know, of course, right? Because the inserters put it in, and nothing over here said that it removed those items. So right now I've basically manually corrupted the system. So this will still tell me it is green, but this one reflects the true state of the train. And so I know that in fact I do not have the train perfectly loaded, right? Because it's not green. If any of the wagons of the tracking wagons are red, this one will be red instead, right? That'll tell you the difference here is, are these lamps lit? If they are green, the state of the wagon is true. Let's just fill this up real quick, right? The state of the train is true. If it is red, then one of the wagons is not properly loaded, right? And there is no corruption. If it is off, completely off, then something is wrong. And over here you have the recycling system. So because of the corruption I just showed you, the problem with the system over here is, of course, that a station can read what's in the train, but it cannot read what's in the train per wagon. So if you want these smart systems where you can load into each wagon individually what you want on the wagon, you need to create a system that tracks what you put into it. And that's what I did. So these inserters tell the memory what's being loaded into the train, and over here I have one inserter that removes the overflow. The problem is essentially that bots deliver too many items, because they deliver not the amount of items they're supposed to deliver, but up to their stack size. So if you want 3 of one items, the bots will actually deliver 4, because that's the stack size, right? So over here, these filter inserters will load the wagon with exactly the amount of items that they're supposed to put in. The problem is there is some delay between the information being updated. So this inserter loads in, let's say I want 5 belts. This inserter loads in 5 belts. Then it takes a couple ticks for that information to be put into the memory, because there are combinators in the way. So there's 1 tick delay, then it gets updated. Then from over here, the information that is being handed to the inserters needs to be updated. That's a couple more ticks. So you have 1, 2, 3, 6 ticks. 7, 8 ticks delay, right? 8 ticks delay until the inserters actually know that they don't need to pick that item up anymore. And during that time, in those 8 ticks, a inserter takes 26 ticks to swing back and forth. So 8 ticks is actually a pretty long frame where an inserter might pick up an item that it doesn't need to pick up anymore. It's not going to be many items. It's just going to be of 1, 2, maybe 3 items. If of the entire loadout, you have maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 items too many, right? So I've put another inserter over on the other end, and this one is going to remove that very small overflow. You don't need more than one because it's probably just going to be 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 items in total that need to be removed for the train to be perfectly balanced. Right. The system does not lock up if there's an item in the loadout that you do not actually have yet. I've put up a roboport that reads the logistic network contents. So if there's an item that cannot be delivered, the inserters do not lock up. They simply don't load that one item, right? They load everything else. However, what I have not enabled is for the train to leave the station if there's items that are not part of the loadout. And the reason for that is because I found while playing that you are about 50-50 on times where you want the train to leave and times where you do not want the train to leave, where you realize that you need to adjust your loadout to make up for items that you aren't producing currently, right? And then in that case, you'd look, why is the train not leaving? Oh shit, there's items missing, I can't load that. Well, I need to adjust my loadout, let's fix that, let's send the train, right? So I have not enabled for the train to leave. So essentially the system gets frozen up in the sense that the train will not leave, but the train will be loaded with everything that you can load, right? The inserters aren't going, because usually what you have is, let's say I don't have any rails currently being produced. Let's see here, the rails are over here. I don't have any rails currently being produced, but I could load all the signals. The problem is now that the inserters will lock up on the rails and they will not load any of the other items. I've taken care of that by reading what's available and adjusting the loadout accordingly. Or it's not the loadout, it's not being directly adjusted, it's just the output of the loadout is being adjusted. And I'm doing that for every single loadout, for every single wagon. Okay. So you accurately load what you want. You can change the loadout on the fly. It won't corrupt the system. Anytime a train comes fresh in, comes fresh into the station, it will be unloaded first to ensure that no corruption can happen. And the train is only allowed to leave once we reach the true state. Right? A train cannot leave just because all the wagons say green. A train can only leave if all the loadout is actually correctly on the train. If all the wagons say green, but this one doesn't, you know something is wrong somewhere, something somehow got corrupted. Maybe you accidentally took out an item from a wagon or something, right, with a control right click or so. Whatever, you need to check up. Down here you have a counter of how many trains you have set to dispatch. Right, so with this switch, you communicate the loadout that you currently want to the train. With this switch, you can erase it without having to erase it here. So usually memories that you can set, if you send an empty set signal, right? If you set the memory with no data, essentially you erase the data that was on it. You could delete a loadout by doing this, for example, right? This would now be an empty loadout. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just turn this switch instead. This train is filled up, everything is deleted, right? And over here you can select how many trains that you want to move. So this is normally set to 1, right? So with every turn of the switch, 1 train, 2, 3, 4, 5 trains. The train already left once, so we're down to 4. And every time the train leaves, you can hear a small ding that tells you, aha, my builder train has left the station, it is coming to me, right? and this will decrement every time. Once it is down to 0, trains cannot leave anymore. Right. And the train is currently just running in circles because I've emptied the loadout. And there you go. We are down to 0. We do not have any check marks in the system anymore. The train will not be allowed to leave the station. Right. And you can use this system very nicely if you say, okay, I need 5 solid loading stations. So you simply put that in here. You activate the loadout and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trains. Or you put in here 5 trains. Turn the switch once. And we are now at... Oh, there's some corruption here. This has not happened to me before. I'll check that out later and fix the blueprint. But usually you'd see here 10 trains can leave. I think this might... I am not sure what's going on here. There's some wire must have connected that broke the system. Let's just disconnect this for the moment. Still going. There you go. Nope. No, it's still, you can still see the flickering, it's still updating. I'm not certain what's going on here. I need to look into that later. All right. So once this is set up, you can properly see how many trains you have set to leave the station. I've stuck with 2 digits here. It's very rarely that you send for like hundreds of trains. If you need to delete this in one go, what you essentially do is you just go here, enter a huge negative number. Didn't for some reason. And there we go. We've just deleted the memory all at once. The memory is this module over here. It looks like this. Over here you have the memory for your builder train, and this is for the maintenance train. And let's talk about the maintenance train. It's essentially the exact same story, except that the train is set, you don't call for a certain number of trains, instead you enable it once and it stays on, right? Trains are always allowed to dispatch from this system forever. The difference and why that is over here. We have, there it is, a rail signal, which if turned red, transmits a signal to the global network of -1 check mark, which means that it gets this decremented from this memory over here. And that I have turned off over here, right? For the system, this would be a dot. So the builder train works on a check mark and the maintenance works on a dot. If you want to, for some reason, enable the system to run only a certain number of trains, you need to put in the dot over here and also change this to basically reflect this operator, right? But there's no real reason why you need that. So instead of telling this how many trains you want, you can just toggle it, right? There you go. All right. Otherwise, the system is exactly the same. The only difference is the color over here for this for supply for outpost maintenance trains. The color I chose was dark blue instead of green. Could have probably just stuck with white, but whatever. The remote is also the same, so are the capacity checkers, right? And you just have a different kind of loadout. I've not adjusted these for the wagon size of artillery wagons, because you might want to change the location of those if you feel like it, right? So this is gonna show red. This is what it looks like if the system believes that the loadout will overflow the capacity of your cargo wagon, right? And since the cargo wagon is set to a capacity of 40 over here, it's gonna overflow. If I change this to 100, as is accurate for the right, would look like this. This is now set up for artillery shells, for artillery wagons. However, it will not accurately reflect the what it would look like for normal wagons if you happen to change the position of those. Right, so currently the artillery trains are set up in such a way that these basically don't really serve as guns in this case, though they obviously can shoot, but they are mostly just glorified cargo wagons that can fit 100 shells rather than the normal 40 that you could fit in a cargo wagon. But if you want, you could, for example, put these in the middle so it would look more symmetrical. The only place I wouldn't put them would be at the front, because the front needs the bots to unload the repair bots to unload them into the roboport. Right. That was an outpost, by the way. We'll look into that now. Right, so the player's depot is designed to supply you with materials and to be adjusted at range. So in each outpost you have again one of these remotes, so you simply go here, and if you want a different loadout you can adjust this, right? You can send it back to base and the train will come in with the correct loadout. This is the step 1 and this is the step 2. What you do is you start with step 1 because this takes your materials, which leaves you in turn more space in the train for tracks, rail signals, power poles, lamps along the tracks, stuff like that. This is basically so that you can build your first outpost seat immediately when you arrive where you want to go, but you still have a lot of space in the train for the tracks you need to get there, right? Or landfill or whatever. In step 1 you have a couple switches as well. This one turns your station on and off. This one you can toggle whether or not your train is allowed to leave the outpost. So normally if it's turned off, the train will come in, will unload, but will not leave. It will essentially block the station for any additional train that you might have sent. And over here you can set in phase 1 the train is being unloaded, in phase 2 the train is being loaded instead, and in phase 3 all the inserters will be turned off. I'll go into more depth on that later. Down here, these you don't need to touch. They are simply one is turned on and the other is turned off. In step 2 it's the other way around. And the idea here is that basically on printing the station, right, if I take step 1 and I print it and I have power, that might be important. Go. And I have power. The station, by using this activates the toggle, right? The station will be turned on without me having to actually turn the switch. That I can still, of course, turn it off without having to do anything with this thing. So I can turn the station on and off freely. But by implementing the system as I have, the station will be naturally turned on. And the same system exists for the train dispatch. It is for the step 1, it is turned off, so the station will not be set to automatically allow the train to leave. The reason for that is that you sometimes don't want your first train to just immediately leave you. You might want to add more stuff into it. You might want to maybe get rid of all the wood that you have in your inventory first and then send it home. Right, so when you plan the step 1, the station will be automatically turned on for your train to approach it, but the train will not immediately leave and over here it's the other way around. In step 2, the station is turned off. If you print the blueprint new, the reason for that is usually that when you have to reprint a station, a step 2 station from across the map, it is usually because of this, because you changed something over here and you want to update the blueprints from a range, right? And in that case, you don't want to toggle this station on so that your builder trains suddenly start coming to this station, right, where you don't actually need them. Therefore here, this one is turned off and the station will not automatically turn itself on. On the other hand, any train that is stuck here, you actually want to leave. So this is turned on, right? And the sum of these two blueprints together mean that you can toggle a station on and off, as well as toggle train dispatch on and off, simply by printing these two steps over each other. And let's put some power in here once again. Right. So currently the station is on. You can see that in the teal lamps over here, the cyan lamps, and the lamps next to that are turned off. And you simply take step 2, right? You overlay it, you print it. Now the dispatch, so if any train was stuck here, it is allowed to leave. And if you want to turn the station off, you simply need to take the other blueprint, right? This is the other blueprint. It's step 1, and you overlay that. And there you go, station turned off, right? So this way you can turn the station on and off from across the map. There's of course also the ability to send a signal across the global network that will force all your stations on, or if you change the I here, if you put a unique value in here, you can also use that to turn one particular station on and off using the global network. Right, this one checks if the A signal you send in has the same value as this I. So you need to send the A signal with the correct value to turn the station on. And that's the same anywhere. I pretty much always use the A as enabled for stations. Right, let's get rid of this. So in step 2, you have one more switch. This is the trash cycle. If you are done building your outpost, so you have all the assemblers down, you have all the stations done, and you're about to leave, you simply enable the trash cycle, and this will force the station to remain on, and it will force the trains to leave until the station is empty. And once that has happened, so let me show you. Right, I have items in here that I want to get rid of. I'm going to enable the trash cycle. The trash cycle will remain on and trains will keep coming. Further, the trash cycle also takes care of sending an empty loadout home. So what it does is basically you turn the trash cycle, it sends to the depot that you need empty trains, right? So empty trains come in here and they will be loaded by the station. The inserters are in phase 2, so they cannot unload, they can only load the train, and they will keep doing that until there is no item in the station anymore, right? At that point, and the last train has left, at that point the station will turn off, the trash cycle will turn off, so will the station, and so will the dispatch, right? And the inserters will go back to the first phase where they can only unload a train. All right, this is the entire circuitry that takes care of what these switches do and takes care of the trash cycle as well. And down here we have a overview of how much space you still have left in these storage chests, right? Currently all the storage chests are free. If I were to start filling them up, slowly these lamps would turn off, and when the final one is red, you have no more space in here. And if you turn the trash cycle on, it calculates how many trains are needed. Should probably, yeah, let's go with that. And if you do this a couple of times, first of all, you will see how eventually, once you have enough, there you go. So we have now used up, what is that? 10% of the space that the station would have, right? The first lamp is off, so we've used up roughly 10%. So trash cycle on. We have one too many, and you can trigger you can toggle the trash cycle, right? Trash cycle is on. The system has calculated to remove this many items, we need one train. The problem is that this is not 100% accurate because the system does not know which wagon needs to be loaded. So if it says that you have 4 wagons worth of items, that is one train, but you have all the items that would load those 4 wagons just in the one up here, say, you need actually 4 trains, right? Because the same wagon will be loaded 4 times instead of 4 wagons being loaded once. So if this number is this low, you cannot really trust it, right? You can tell that you're not going to need too many trains, but it might be 1 train, it might be 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 trains, right? It just tells you that you aren't going to need too many trains. But if the entire station is filled up and you're like up here somewhere, then it's actually fairly accurate, and you can trust that you will need roughly this many trains. But again, this is more a guess than an accurate number. The system, the trash cycle, sends home how many trains you need and will update that depending on if the last train that it thought it needed and the system is still not empty. It will actually take care of that and keep updating the system that it needs one more train, one more train, one more train until you are fully empty. Right. And I believe that's it. Well, over here, this one's maybe nice. So this is the building part, and this is the outpost maintenance part and supply part. This is where you set what you want your station to have, right? What you want the station to unload is what you set in here. You say of that load, the fraction of it. So currently I'm unloading 1/3 of what I'm setting here. I could set that to 1 and it would unload exactly the whole of what I set, right? The idea though is that your train essentially serves as a local chest buffer. So anytime the station detects that it has less than 1/3 of this, right, of what you set here, if it has 1/3 of that, less than 1/3 of that, it will start to unload that item from the train. And that means that you won't build a huge buffer in these chests, which, you know, cannot be emptied. So you don't actually want too many items in here. You want them on the train instead, which can simply go back to the depot and get recycled, right? So most of the items will stay in the train and the station will only unload what it currently needs. Unless you don't want that, of course, right? Which again, you can change here. So, and over here is the alarm. If you are at 1/10 of what you've set in here, you will be warned with a alert, right? If you see this, outpost supply less 10%, and then you know that you need to go and do something about it. Now, this over here is a fraction. The allowance is 10%, but this is not 10%. This is 1/10, which happens to be the case. But if you say you want 1%, right, you don't enter 1, you enter 100, right? The fraction, the 100th fraction, essentially. Hence why I wrote that here, so you remember when you actually need to change this or want to change this. So what happens is the train, and let me show that to you over here, right? When you first print it, it looks roughly like this. The train is intentionally, of course, this is so that you remember to activate this train, because the train goes into its station. Where is it currently trying to go? Is it going to the depot? Yeah. All right. Let's have you actually enter your so it's currently going back to the maintenance outpost. So the train, when you first enable it, and the first time it goes into the station, it registers itself into the circuit. So the station is set to read the train ID, right? Read stop train. It sends that as signal T into the circuit, and that is saved permanently to this circuit. That means that the station recognizes whether the train that is in it belongs to it, right? And once the station detects that it needs more items because it is one under that threshold you set, but the train can't unload it anymore, in that case the train leaves and goes to the depot to get refilled, right? The train comes, and the moment that the train arrives in the depot, the depot sends that information to the global network, and this station now recognizes that the train that is currently being loaded is the train that belongs to this outpost. So what happens then is that the train, that the outpost sends its loadout back to the base. So the train that belongs to this base, to this outpost, gets loaded with the loadout that you set here, right? Not any random or any generic loadout, but the one that you set here. Other than that, the remote is exactly the same as the other one over here, right? And so over here you can set what the train is to be loaded with, and here you can set what the station is supposed to unload. Generally speaking, they'll be the same, and you'll simply say, okay, of this loadout, you want this many items. This is the threshold that you want to be unloaded into the station. Okay. And every outpost has its private train. And the way I manage that is by turning the station on and off depending, right? So the station is turned off like 99% of the time, right? Because 99% of the time its train is in the station. So as soon as the right train drives into the station turns off. And it will only re-enable if this train is currently being loaded in the depot or in any depot. You can have multiple. Of this depot, you can have multiple across the map if it's getting really big. The problem is just that you have to build a mall for every single one essentially, or deliver all the materials that you need to every single of these depots, right? So most likely you'll only have one, but if you want more, you can have more. So as soon as this train that belongs to this system is being detected as being loaded, this station will turn back on, and it will stay on until this train that belongs to it has parked at it again. Then it turns off and it stays off. The only time that the wrong train might come in here is when your trains got caught up in a traffic jam, and the train that was previously going to its own outpost somehow recalculated and found out that this station, this outpost, here we go, maintenance unload, is actually closer than the one it was supposed to go to. That's no issue. The train will simply go in here, will unload the items that the station needs. The reason for that is that the train that just came in here might have ended up blocking the correct train, right? So we want to make sure that at least some of the items that the station needs are being unloaded, and it won't unload the wrong item because again you set in here what you want, right? Then the wrong train will go back to the depot, refresh itself, and at that point the correct train will have come back in here and will have turned the station off. So the wrong train is now being rerouted to its actual outpost, right? And I've tested the system with 20 different trains being dispatched at the same time, yeah, with 20 different outposts being turned on in 20 different depots at the same time. And while you get a couple trains, a couple loops of the wrong train in the wrong outposts, eventually the system settles down properly, because the station can only turn itself off once the correct train is it, right? The most important part of this is really that you remember over here, when you put the train in, that you remember to activate this train, that it goes to its unload station, right? In this case, it is always the closest one, right? The station is currently turned off, so what you do is you manually turn it on. Just like over here, you have a switch that you can turn the station on with. The difference here is because this is designed to be turned off most of the time. This is not a toggle. This is just if the station is turned off and for whatever reason you need it to be turned on, you can, for a single time, basically with every turn you turn it on for a single time if it was turned off. And over here you have the same thing. If for whatever reason you messed with the train and you actually need it to be refreshed, you can force the train once to leave the station, right? And this will turn off as soon as the train is back with the correct loadout. Okay. Yep, that's it for the overview. I actually did go into some depth in this first video. That is because at this point I haven't unloaded further videos. If you have watched the videos of the version 5, you are mostly familiar with the system. The only changes I have made, the biggest change was the smart loading system. This cannot get stuck anymore, right? It just doesn't. It is not as flexible as the old system. It is not quite as fast, though it is not much slower, right? The difference is not huge. There is some, but it's not big, really not big. In return, it doesn't get stuck anymore at all. So I have run this test over here. I've gone, do I still have it? Yeah. I've set it to send 1000 trains, right? I've set it to speed 64 times, and then I've just let it run an hour or so until the 1000 trains were exhausted, and it didn't get stuck once. So it definitely is very reliable, much more reliable even than the already very reliable version 5. All right. Thank you for watching.